Hello, hello, hello. Ambrose Blowfield here from the Sales Mastery Company. And today I want to share with you a very important area that all salespeople need to master around the world, and that is to sell to the most popular or populous actual personality profile that actually exists around the world. These, of course, under the DISC profiling system, are the shy people in the world. These are the steady or steadiness personality profile. So let's wait no more. Let's jump straight into it. And I want to share with you the workbook that if you haven't access to our social media, you need to send an immediate email to admin@salesmasterycompany.com and request this workbook, which is how to sell to steady personalities, otherwise known as shy people. Statistically, in most parts of the world, there is a subtle cultural difference in different parts of the world, but essentially, for most research suggests that at least 37% of humans, as in 1/3 of humans, have this particular profile. So the chances are, if you work in sales, whether you're new to sales, you've been in sales for many, many years, you're going to come across a fair number of these shy personalities. And there's certain ways you need to adapt your words, your language, your demeanor in order to connect to them more. So let's just jump straight into it. If you've got the workbook, you'll see on page 2, there's a welcome note. But let's look at the profiling of your customers. Now, I know the ancient Greeks had the 4 traits theory from 2,500 years ago. I know the ancient Chinese talked about spring, summer, autumn, winter energy people in the book I Ching. But ultimately, in this day and age, while there are hundreds and hundreds of different profiling tools, the 2 most popular ones in the world tend to be either Myers-Briggs, which I like, except for the fact that it's so complex. I find colleagues tend not to share insight into each other because they're vastly different. And then there's DISC, or otherwise known as extended DISC. Now, we use extended DISC out of Finland because there's a few kind of trapdoor things around it, which I really like. I like that it gives us insights into someone's conscious and unconscious profile. And I also like the fact that if someone's trying to cheat the system, it rejects them and makes them take it again. But if you strip it back down to the basics, regardless of what personality profiling tool you're using, you generally would see indications of people's behaviors. Now, I will caution you and say that typically 60% of our personality or our behavioral profile is said to be there at birth. So no matter what happens in our life, 60% of us you could see as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old, and pretty much you'd see indications of that in the adult life. In saying that, we do go through change. So 40% of our personality or behavioral profile tends to evolve steadily over time, depending on the country and the world we grow up in, whether we're an only child, whether we're the oldest child, the youngest child, if we get married, if we go through divorce, if we have children, if we change industries or sectors or geographies around the world. You know, big life changes can have a difficult impact or a definite impact on your behavioral profile. But in essence, what we're talking about right now is just the understanding that you have an indication of likely behavior. And you can easily read your customers across the 4 axes, or the 4 points, if you like, of the axes here. Typically, you know if somebody's extroverted or not. That's pretty easy. They're expressive with their demeanors, expressive with their language. They look you dead in the eye. Very easy to spot a customer or client or a colleague along those lines. At the other extreme of the same axes, of course, you have people who are less expressive. So people who are more introverted. So they're lower energy people. They might look you in the eye and then possibly look away. And they won't hold your stare. Maybe they don't use their hands so much to talk. And maybe you see the tops of their head a whole lot more. Then the other 2 points on the other axes is listening to the words and the language they use. There are some people there who talk endlessly around people. And if they talk endlessly around people, then of course they're people-centric. So if they talk about the name of their dog and their cat and their family and their team members, and they talk about the bosses and the owners and maybe even the name of their other suppliers, if they're referring to people a lot, the chances are they're more people-oriented people. At the same extreme, there's other people who don't talk about people. They talk about the business, the project, the job, the percentage of this and the percentage of that, and the numbers of this and the numbers of that. Now, it's not so much the talking about the numbers is the case. It's what are they counting? If they're talking about the names of the people, if they say there's 6 people going to be impacted, it'll be Jane and Lucy and David and John, and they start talking about the names, they're probably people-oriented. If they say there's 6 in the team, and they don't reference the people, or they even talk about team, they say there are 6 people involved. They're just talking about people as if they're just objects or they're just resources. Then the chances are they'll tend to be more task-oriented. So when we think about extended DISC as a profiling tool, as a general rule, if somebody is extroverted and talks more about things, they tend to be a dominant or D profile. If they're extroverted and expressive and high energy, and they talk more about people, then the chances are they're an influence profile. If they're a steady profile person, they'll tend to be shyer, but their heart is with people. Listen to the language there. Their heart is with people. They're very feeling-based people, and that's the people we're going to focus on today. And finally, if that person is shy, but they talk about methodologies and process, the chances are they're more compliance-based. And once you start to read people, bearing in mind you should be able to diagnose people if you've got experience and training in this area in the space of pretty much 30 seconds to a minute, as much as 10 minutes. But after that, sitting next to someone on a plane or meeting around the board or table or even talking to them on the phone, you should have a good, confident understanding around that. Now, I do want to caution you and also say, don't pigeonhole people. Sometimes you can have somebody who's a very dominant, outward focused person who actually on some days is particularly shy because they just lost their biggest customer or they lost their biggest supplier, and that's affected their mood and their behavioral profile. So please don't pigeonhole people. Don't put them in a box and think that's the only way they're going to be. However, if you have done a basic understanding of this and you start to test it, you identify someone as shy, there's some critical things you need to understand. Firstly, they will be very principled-based people. They will tend to do what is right. They'll often care about the values in their culture. They'll care about your values and your culture, not from an ethnicity perspective, but more from a business principles perspective. So if you start cutting corners or taking risks with these people, they'll think that's not based on values and principles. I'm not sure if I want to buy someone like that. So if you go headstrong into these people, if you cut corners into these shy or steady personalities, the chances are you'll turn them off very quickly. Here's the challenge. They probably won't tell you to your face. They'll probably just stall and delay and stall and delay. Now, these guys naturally stall and delay, so don't take stalling as a sign of they don't like me, they don't trust me. Just understand that they're going to be prone to do that. But because they're not confrontational people, they probably won't out and out tell you they've chosen to go elsewhere. A dominant person would tell you, an influenced person would mostly tell you. A steady or shy person probably wouldn't tell you. Number two, when you are sharing the solution you've got, the project you've got, the products you've got, and the services you've got, you need to talk about the impact on people. They care about the impact on people. So you need to present it in a way, your value proposition in a way to say David and Jane and Susan and Michael are going to really enjoy this. It's going to help save them time. It's going to make them more money. It's going to build their confidence. It'll give them the return on investment that they deserve. That's the sort of language we should be using with steady personality profiles. Number three, as I've said already, they're introverted people. So not only do you need to accept the fact that they're low energy, that you'll need to be a bit of the energy in the room. You'll have to pick them up on the phone call, for example, to engage them. But don't expect to get much enduring power back. They're probably going to feed off yours, excuse me, because they do like people. But at the same time, they're not going to give a huge amount of energy back. But here is your challenge. You'll often not be able to read them. Now, there's a little bit of a commonality between steady profiles and compliance profiles in this particular point, except that these guys will do it deliberately, whereas compliance profiles will do it without thinking. These guys don't want to offend. They don't want to be called out. They don't want confrontation. So you often sense they have a feeling or they have a thought around your solution, but they won't necessarily be forthcoming. So what you're going to have to learn to do is to slow down the conversation, use non-aggressive body language and tone on your questions. Be patient, bite your tongue, ask incredibly strong, open-ended questions, something we teach in persuasive selling called general leads, and wait for them to open up. You're going to have to earn the right for them to trust you, to want to offer their opinions. These people are very nice people. They'll tend not to argue with you. They tend not to get confrontational with you, but they're hard work to open up because they're just shy to open up by nature. Number five, these guys are naturally slow to make decisions because they prefer to stick to the status quo. They live more in the past and the present than they worry about the future. Dominance and influence types are very motivated by the future. These guys are motivated by what is or what was. So from that perspective, that means they're hesitant to make a decision. This is why I find a lot of dominant salespeople or influence salespeople get very frustrated with steady profiles when they're selling to them. Because they say, well, I understood the needs and the customer told me they had pains. I fixed those problems. I pitched a solution that logically was the right thing. And then this person still doesn't go ahead. I'm getting infuriated with them. Well, firstly, if you show frustration or anger with these people, they will absolutely become passive aggressive and not make a decision in your favor. And they'll probably start to treat it as a game and to really drag it out, that decision making. But likewise, if you're working with these profile people, remembering and respecting the fact that they're going to take a bit of time, might mean you have to ask questions such as, so what do we need to do to move you forward? Or it sounds logical that you've got some issues and that we've got a solution for that. You know, how could we work together for you and I to make sure your team's got the best support they need moving forward, that they deserve. As you mentioned, Jane and Susan would really appreciate that support. And either way, you're picking up on these key points here, and you're nurturing the fact that it's all about the team. Number 6, here is what frustrates most people as salespeople. We coach them around the world, and we're dealing with these shy or steady personality types, is the client goes, yep, it sounds good, but I just need to think about it. And it's partly because they're risk averse. Sometimes it's because they want to see how you respond and react. But ultimately, you can't rush them while also holding them to a deadline. So what you're going to have to do here is, during your fact finding, before you present your solution and talk about your timelines of decision making, you need to identify with the client by when should they make the decision in order to get the benefits from you, and what would happen if they delayed the decision. Because if they feel like there's a pain they're going to avoid by making a decision quickly, the chances are you hold them accountable. But if they don't feel like there's any deadline passed, or if there's any issues later by delaying, then they'll happily sit on the fence and sit on the fence. They'll often live their life on the principle of, I want to do what is right and I want to do what is fair. So even though the incumbent supplier is letting me down, they're overall a nice person and I don't want to let them down. What if it impacts their commission check? So they're very soft-hearted people here, but very principled as well, very staunch on their principles. Their focal point when they talk to you and they want to know about your solution is, when is it going to happen? They might even throw in the question at the back of their mind, why are we doing it this way? Why are we going to change? Why does your business exist? Why do you go up to work every single day? They want to know those principles and those values and those missions and those visions because they care about that sort of stuff. Likewise, they'll often ask you questions rather than point at you and forcefully tell you what they want. So that's why you have to work hard. You have to ask them questions just like they ask you questions. They'll tend to want a slower pace of decision making, a slower pace of the meeting, a slower pace of the phone call, and they won't want to feel rushed. So at the start of your phone calls and your conversations with them, you need to agree how long you've got for the meeting, because they won't want to rush by nature. Remember, they prefer to live in the present or live in the past. They're not rushing for the future. And then finally, they need you to show respect to their current supplier, who is your opposition, to other people they work with, to their team, to themselves, possibly even to their friends and their family members. They want to see you demonstrating respect because they show a lot of respect. They don't want you to ruffle feathers in their team. So if you say, listen, why don't we just get this done, smash it out, who cares if she complains? If that's the case, that's not harmonious, in which case they're probably going to rebel against it. So you really undermine yourself. Next few things worth keeping in mind. As I mentioned, this is something we teach in our persuasive selling process. So if you want to set aside a day, people typically brace it over about a 3-day period. For $750 US, we can teach you a world-class methodology for how to run sales meetings. Face-to-face, we do it over 2 days. I'm about to board a plane to head off to Argentina to teach that in Spanish over there. And I've done it in France and the UK, in North America, right across Australasia as well. But if you simply want to get some insights into the personality profile of yourself, maybe your number one customer, or even your colleagues, then by attending today's session, there's actually a link in the workbook where you can get a discounted access to an extended disc profiling tool. As I mentioned today, 37% of salespeople are focusing directly all of their time talking to steady profiles. That's a lot of our time we're spent talking to these shy personalities who we have to work hard to work alongside. Now, if you truly want to accelerate your business moving forward and you are a sales manager, a senior salesperson, or a business owner, then simply send us an email to admin@salesmasterycompany.com, or simply click on the link and book in for a free scale-up call. We'll give you some free advice straight away from booking. Maybe our sales academy is the right solution for you. We have intakes once a quarter, every quarter. Maybe working one-on-one is the way you need to go. But either way, I want you to take on board what you've learned today, share it with your colleagues, use this document again and again to come back to it, just to remind you. These guys are very, very popular as a profile. They're not the most expressive people in the world, but they make a lot of decisions, and they're the people who tend to make the longest delays moving forward. I've been Ambers Blowfield with the Sales Mastery Company, and more than anything else, I'd like you to